Okay, so as I said, I will begin with Constantine Melnikov, and then we'll talk about Sir Richard Rogers. So happy birthday, Konstantin Melnikov. He was born on this day, the 22nd of July in 1890. I don't know if in the old calendar exactly what the date was, but maybe, let's see. So actually, I made a mistake. Well, it's not really a mistake. In the old, system of counting time, it was July 22nd, but actually it's August 3rd using this calendar. Anyway, we'll talk about him today. So Konstantin Melnikov, 1890, 1974, a very important Russian architect. I truly admire him. So Konstantin Stepanovich Melnikov was a Russian architect and painter. His architectural work compressed into a single decade, 1923 to 1933. So he actually worked only for 10 years, placed Melnikov on the front end of the 1920s avant-garde architecture. Although associated with the constructivists, Melnikov was an independent artist, not bound by the rules of a particular style or artistic group. In 1930s, Melnikov refused to conform with the rising Stalinist architecture, withdrew from practice and worked as a portraitist and teacher until the end of his life. A tragic life, I would say. Konstantin Melnikov was born and died in Moscow. He was the fourth child of the family. His father, Stepan Ilarionovich Melnikov, originally from Novgorod region, was a road maintenance foreman employed by the Moscow Agricultural Academy. His mother came from the peasants of this district, Svenigorod. The whole family occupied a single room of a state-managed working class barrack in Hay Lodge. And then a quiet northern suburb of Moscow. Melnikov tried hard to rise above bitter poverty, to return to farming, and eventually relocated to their own small house and set their own dairy farm. Konstantin Melnikov later praised his father, who noticed the little boy's addiction to drawing and regularly brought him scrap paper for drawing from the academy. However, all the education they could afford was a 2-year parish school, completed in 1903. Konstantin met his golden day in life through a milk delivery woman who happened to serve the family of Vladimir Chaplin, a wealthy engineer. She recommended Konstantin's drawings to Chaplin, who was so impressed that he hired the teenager to his firm and paid for his art studies. Chaplin overestimated Melnikov's basic education, and Konstantin failed his grammar test at the Moscow School of Painting, Sculpture, and Architecture in 1904. 1 year later, he passed the admissions that selected a class of 11 out of 270 applicants. Melnikov studied at the school for 12 years, first completing general education in 1910, then graduating in arts 1914 and architecture 1917. Despite Chaplin's calls to concentrate on architecture, Melnikov leaned to painting. By the time he joined the architecture classes, he already was a well-recognized portrait painter. To be honest with you, it does move me, this biography, and that's why I allow myself to read it, because I think he's an example, as a child living in poverty, in difficult conditions. You have to imagine a whole family living in one single room. And he arrived at excellence, not just in Moscow, not just in Russia, but also in Paris. So we are going to see the works of these remarkable men. And I think if this kind of man is not an example, of course, the level of indifference here is infuriating me every single day. But fortunately, there were in the world, and there are in the world, people who were not indifferent and who fought with poverty, who were not spoiled, and they achieved great, great results. And Constantine Melnikov deserves our applause for this. This was the man. And you have to imagine, he was accused later on as being a bourgeois architect, when in fact, he was an avant-garde artist and architect, and he was actually having a very, very poor upbringing. So there was nothing bourgeois about his life. Although he does look here a little bit, but maybe we romanticize the attire of those times. Anyway, I truly admire Constantine Melnikov. And here he is as an old man in his remarkable private house he built for himself in Moscow, and we are going to see in detail. Truly a remarkable artist and architect. So Constantine Melnikov was born to a peasant family in Moscow in 1890. Through the efforts of the engineers to whom he was apprenticed, he attended the Moscow School of Painting, Sculpture, and Architecture. Although he initially studied painting, when he entered the school in 1905, he studied architecture from 1912. We already read this, until he completed his studies in 1917. Drawings. Yes, such a drawing even today would be considered extravagant and so-called avant-garde. These are probably studied for his own house, which he built. Really, I truly believe people like Melnikov are great mentors and great source of inspiration. In our country, all the time I'm being told, we are poor, we cannot do this, we cannot do that. Well, how was Russia at the beginning of the 20th century? Especially in the case of this man who came from very poor upbringing. So we should stop excusing ourselves that we are poor. We are not poor. Romania is not such a poor country at all. We're just spoiled, we like to lament, la volupté de l'échec. We can do much more than we do, but we have to change something in our mentality, the Miorița mentality, where the sheep was more courageous than the shepherd. Yes, because in Miorița, as you remember, Miorița, encouraged the peasant, the shepherd to fight or to run. And instead, the shepherd chose to just allow himself to be killed. And this says a lot about us. I mean, really, we should reflect on this. Miorița, which is the basic myth of our spirituality and psychological frame of mind. In Miorița, the sheep is more courageous than the shepherd. I know that Nikita Stănescu had different interpretations about it, but I don't know. Anyway, drawings by Constantine Melnikov, back to this Russian man born in poor circumstances and arriving at the top of architecture in a country which had remarkable architects and artists. 1923, this pavilion for the all Russian agricultural and handicraft industries, but it was destroyed, but we still have this picture. And I love this. This is a good building. This is architecture, and it's done modestly. It was demolished. It was done with wood, as you can see. But it doesn't matter. It's architecture, and the spirit of architecture is alive in this building. And that's why I keep saying we should stop excusing ourselves for not having sufficient money and so on. It's not that. It's not about the money. It's about the spirit of the work. If the spirit of the work is alive and intense, then you can do a lot with very little money. This is my conviction. I mean, really, how much this building do you think costed? I mean, but it's architecture. And it's architecture because the one who did it was an architect. That is, he deserved the name an architect. And for that time, it was an innovative building. 1924, 1925, this market, this was also, well, you know, it says it was destroyed, but I saw pictures which are not too old, as you can see here, the fragment of this car. Uh, this building, I don't know, sometimes the information is as it is. Anyway, we can look at it. I mean, it's the deteriorated building, but it's not yeah, it's still standing. 1924, 1925, office of new Sukharev market in Moscow. Now the competition entry for the USSR pavilion at the Exposition Internationale des Arts Décoratifs and Industriels Modernes in Paris. This was destroyed, and it is a shame because it was a great building, but we'll arrive at it. A bus garage, this one was refurbished, and I'm glad that it was. So somehow, you know, refurbished doesn't look so authentic, but you know, maybe the refurbishment. No, I think I imagine, I hope it was done properly. An interesting plan, actually, because you wouldn't expect it to, you know, to have these diagonals within the plan. The Russians even now have ambitions in the field of architecture to be in the front line of architectural research and so on. I mentioned this before. They have a very innovative architecture school, which is called Strelka, where people like Rem Koolhaas go a few times a year there to teach and so on. So they are really pushing the frontiers of architecture. And I think we can learn from Moscow as well. You know, why is it they can do it and we can't? Why can't we have such a school of architecture in Romania? Now, this is the pavilion that I mentioned, I read before. He won the competition and he built it in 1925. So he was 35 years old, and it was one of the most remarkable buildings in this world exhibition, if not the most remarkable. Look at this. I mean, if this building was built today, it would be considered hot or cool, and it would be published on the most famous websites or you know, e-magazines and so on. It was made in 1925, almost 100 years ago. By whom? By Constantine Melnikov, the son of peasants' parents, you know, peasant parents. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in what conditions you are born. If you have something to say, you say it. I mean, after all, we have Constantine Brâncuș also now, another Constantine. Well, in what circumstances was Constantine Brâncuș born? He left for Paris on foot. That's how he left for Paris. And he revolutionized culture. So those who excuse themselves that they're either born in difficult conditions or circumstances or that they don't have luck, come on, it's not really about luck. It's about how much intensity you put in your work and how much love, essentially. Because Frank Lloyd Wright was indeed right. Talent is good, practice is better, passion is best. If you have passion, you can go far. It doesn't matter. You are poor, you are short, you are even physical problems, you can do it. Maybe I'm too optimistic today, but I do believe that nothing can stop the genius. If the genius exists and you don't betray it, you know, you can do a lot. It doesn't matter. You are born in you know, a rich Western country or in a poor, in Bangladesh, for example. Bangladesh has beautiful architecture today, much of it done with bamboos. They also have modern, mundane even architecture, but I admire that architecture done with simple means, which is great. And Bangladesh is one of the poorest countries in the world, apparently. Anyway, this building by Constantine Melnikov has to be studied and admired because it looks fresh even from almost 100 years later, meaning from today. And look at the plan and look at the elevation. It's, uh, it's the same spirit in both, although they are not literally reflecting each other. And again, the power of the diagonals. You'll see later on also a project for a parking he did for Paris. Very, very interesting. It was not built, but I think it should be built. These were the original drawings. A factory club in Moscow. But I don't know, maybe I'll have pictures later on. Sometimes it's difficult to find, pictures or the works were, damaged or destroyed even. Anyway, this building is by him. It's a factory club. Again, the diagonals mean a lot. I mean, these stairs, they are placed in plan diagonally, and where you have a diagonal, there is always a chance for an increased liveliness. Just like in the pavilion in Paris that we just saw. What is a diagonal? In a way, it's a betrayal. No, it's the Judah of architectural planning. It's a traitor, the diagonal. But because of the traitor, you have an increased energy in the building. A traitor in what sense? That it betrays the Cartesian system. A workers' club. This is also an important building by him. Also, when was it done? It doesn't say, but around that time, 1920 something. Well, it looks like they built a lot of workers' clubs. Anyway, I guess they wanted to corrupt the workers, you know, or to emancipate themselves through, I don't know, artistic activities and so on. I mean, I don't think in capitalism too many, you know, corporations are so interested in building workers' clubs. But the Soviets, it seems, at that time, they were interested in this. If just Melnikov built 3 or 4. Look, another factory club. I don't know if it was built. It's a project. It was built. And it's still standing. Maybe it's not so radical as the pavilion in Paris and one of the earlier clubs that we looked at, but still. Now, this is another remarkable building, his own residence, and he had to suffer because of this building because he was accused of having a bourgeois, you know, leaning or a bourgeois state of mind. It's truly a very, very nice building. I don't know who wrote the SOS. It's not part of the building. Maybe it's just some kind of a Photoshop intervention. But the building, you know, is one of the most remarkable private residences really in the history of architecture and, you know, his own residence. Now, you know, the chairs and the bed and you know everything else is somehow you know traditional, so to speak. But the building itself is unique and fresh, architecturally speaking. Look at those windows, and it's also a cylinder. In fact, it's an excellent building. A life dedicated to art, to creativity. That's all we can say. I mean, I look at this studio and it's in no way inferior to the studio, for example, Le Corbusier built for Aux Enfants in Paris. It's it's really a remarkable building. There are, in fact, 2 cylinders that intersect, kind of like the 2 circles that intersect in a similar way in the Brion Cemetery by Carlos Carpa. It is, in a way, a symbol of wholeness. Now, if he remained entrapped in this apartment, in this building, after he refused to collaborate with the Stalinists, I guess he, you know, it was a very enjoyable prison, if I can call it so. He was a dreamer, that's what he was. Like, I would say, like any true creator. The creators are dreamers. You know, as Oscar Wilde said, we are all in the gutter, but some of us look up to the stars. Well, he looked up to the stars. So the bedrooms are actually on the ground floor, and then now I'm a little bit confused here because maybe there was another plan that is not shown here. This building is an event. That's what it is. It is an event. It is different from the building on the left. It is different from the building on the right. The contextualist might say that it doesn't respect the context, but he himself was an event. The man, he was different. He was different than most other people of his country at that time. And the building expresses that difference, that otherness. And it's not an arrogant building, really. It's maybe extravagant for the buildings around it, but it's not arrogant. It's an artist. I mean, he was an artist, and the building expresses the uniqueness of the artist. The artist was not spoiled, and yet he didn't lose hope. And the hope came from his work, from his creativity. "1930, 1931," but I don't have pictures. This is a garage. In a strange way, he built this garage. We saw a previous one before, and he made the plans for one in Paris. So, he was not, spoiled with very cultural programs, but still tried his best to do architecture. Now, the plan of this has something of Claude Nicolas Ledoux. Another garage. What can we say? But it looks like, in a way, like a maison de culture, a house of culture or something. It's a garage. Even a garage, if it's done with creativity and passion, could become architecture. Another garage. This one actually even more dramatic. Can you bring cosmic values into a garage? I guess he felt so somehow. I mean, there is a level of rhetorics here that I mentioned a little earlier, Ledoux. Well, here I could almost mention a little bit Boulez. You know, there is an emphasis on form, on the circle. The power of the circle is remarkable, especially under certain conditions of light and shadow. What exactly is happening behind those, you know, those large windows, I don't know. And now you are going to see a few works that remained just projects. The design for Lenin's sarcophagus. Unfortunately, I cannot verbalize about it because it's hard for me to understand what is happening here. Although maybe not so hard. I mean, you do see a sarcophagus there for the great man for the Soviets. Um, he had futuristic tendencies. Now, the competition entry for the Moscow bureau of the newspaper Leningrad Pravda, maybe he did these works after he was dismissed in a way, or he dismissed himself from having anything to do with the Stalinists, and he kept working on competitions, but they were not built. So this was for Pravda itself an interesting work. I don't see anything bourgeois here, but you know, that's maybe it was the accusation of envy, you know, for the house he built for himself. Interesting, the way he depicts in this drawing these two people, maybe having you know, shouting at each other, but I don't know, it's rather humorous, the posture, the positioning of these two men. Anyway, a competition entry for the monument of Christopher Columbus in Santo Domingo. Not the most modest project on earth, it's true. Competition entry for the Palace of the Soviets. The project was awarded to Boris Yofan and Vladimir Shuko, never built. The Corbusier also participated in this competition and he didn't win. Anyway, 1932, 1933, sorry for the resolution of these images. Rather fantastic, the project. I'm not surprised it was rejected. Another building, another competition entry for Red Square in Moscow, 1934. You see already his trademark, the placement of the stairways, diagonally, and yes, the presence of the diagonal is continuously felt and seen. In a way, his professional life was tragic, for a man of his talent and his accomplishments. He only worked practically for, I don't know, 15 years or so, and he lived a long life. But you see, even his projects mean something. And now I end the presentation on Constantine Melnikov with these two parking garages in Paris, which are, I think, very interesting, but they were not built. And again, we see his style, so to speak, his way of doing architecture. But it's also interesting in this case how, he places these supporting men, inclined themselves diagonally above the Seine, above the river. Now the plan is a little bit cryptical for me, but it's about the functionality of within the garage. Interesting drawings. A garage for 100 vehicles, 1,000 vehicles, incredible. But look at the abstractness of the scheme, which is beautiful even graphically. He was a visionary. I mean, who would do something like this for a garage? Or like this? Bravo to him. Too bad was not built. If it was built, it would have been one of the best buildings in Paris. Okay, so let's wish him happy birthday. And now we go to Sir Richard Rogers, a very accomplished architect, and not just because he received the Pritzker Prize. Um, as I said, his birthday will be tomorrow, but because tomorrow I will talk about two other very accomplished architects, Arata Isozaki, who himself received the Pritzker, and Raymond Abraham. So Richard Rogers. It might be that he died this year. My memory is not very it's not serving me very well. He died either last year or this year, and I couldn't find information, which is very strange. I didn't search a whole day for it, but Wikipedia only mentions when he was born, like he died. So Richard George Rogers, Baron Rogers of Riverside, CH, Freeba, whatever, the British, they have these long qualifications that anyway, was an Italian British architect noted for his modernist and functionalist designs in high-tech architecture. Rogers is perhaps best known for his work on the Pompidou Center in Paris, the Lloyd's Building and the Millennium Dome, both in London, the Senate Building in Cardiff, and the European Court of Human Rights Building in Strasbourg. We had one of the engineers who worked in that building with us here last year when we also talked about him. Anyway, he didn't come to today, but he's a winner of the Riba Gold Medal, the Thomas Jefferson Medal, the Riba Sterling Prize, the Minerva Medal, and the Pritzker Prize. He was a senior partner at Rogers Sturck Harbor and Partners, previously known as the Richard Rogers Partnership, until 30th of June 2020. Well, I don't know if he died on the 30th of June. I think he died a little later, but anyway. This was Sir Richard Rogers. I think he was an unassuming man, a rather modest man, and you'll see some works towards the end of this presentation that I would say testify about this. Here he is with Sir Norman Foster when they were young students at Yale University. So this is Sir Norman Foster, a student at Yale, and this is Sir Richard Rogers. Both became sirs because of their accomplishment in architecture. So Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers in 1976. Look at them, young people who won the competition for Centre Georges Pompidou. Bravo to them. And, you know, that launched both of them on a you know, spectacular career, and they both received the Pritzker Prize. Here they are actually on the structure of Centre Georges Pompidou in Paris. In the front is Sir Richard Rogers. Behind him is Renzo Piano. And the third one is the brilliant engineer, Peter Rice, who unfortunately died young. But the three of them did this building. Bravo to them. Now, when he began to work for himself, so to speak, he was part of the Team 4. And there were actually him and Sir Richard, well, Norman Foster and their wives. Team 4 photography 1966. Here they are. Now, if I remember correctly, I think the wife of Sir Norman Foster is this one, who is actually sitting on the lap of the man we pay homage to today, Richard Rogers. And this is the wife of Richard Rogers, who sits on the lap of Sir Norman Foster. I don't know who the other four people are, probably, you know, their collaborators. Anyway, these are the four. You know, and bravo to them, 4 young people, 4 dreamers who fought for their dreams and who achieved a lot. I mean, a lot. Creekview in Cornwall, 1966. This is an interesting, not so much this, but let's hope I arrive at. I actually like the building more when it is affected by the elements. I like this part, which is a little bit underground. It's a small hut in a way, but it's nice. It's refreshingly, you know, modern, so to speak. Okay, this is the retreat that you just saw. Not bad. It was something in the 60s, you know, fresh spirit in the air, and you know, the iconoclastic spirit of the students in Sorbonne or in England or even in the United States. They were fighting against the war. There was a lot of energy then. I wish something like this would happen to us too, although I'm afraid indifference is the king these days. Now, these are the larger buildings, but I like this. I like the little hut, the refuge. So again, you can do great architecture with a very small structure. It doesn't have to be a huge building. This one actually is less than a room. Or to use the title of a brilliant book by Joseph Brodsky, who won the Nobel Prize for Poetry, the youngest man to receive the Nobel for Poetry. He wrote a book called Less Than One. In a way, this little building is less than one. Reliance controls a factory in the UK, 1967. Already there are insinuations, powerful insinuations of the high-tech aesthetics that he became famous for, and in good measure also Sir Norman Foster. Here, I think they split, and they formed a second company, Richard and Sue Rogers Architects, with John Young and Laurie Abbott. Zip-Up House. The Zip-Up House was designed between 1967 and 1969 for the House of Today competition, which was sponsored by DuPont and was exhibited at the 1969 Ideal Home exhibition in London. The design was for a factory-built house, quick to assemble and reassemble with cheap insulation panels that are used on refrigeration trucks with rapid construction, all at low cost. Richard Rogers wrote, "Buying clothes off the rack is the norm. We wanted to do the same for the house, an affordable, speedy kit of parts." And look at this. It was, again, that great spirit at the end of the 60s, you know, a spirit of rejuvenation, of novelty. There was a revolution in the air, and in architecture as well, as you can see. They believed in technology. It was an optimistic spirit, it's true. An optimistic spirit which seems to be lacking today. Now, for the association with Renzo Piano created several works. The Universal Oil Products in UK, then B&B Italia headquarters. So they worked before they actually won the competition for the Pompidou Center in Paris. Here they are. I love this picture. I love this picture because it shows two young men who took their lives in their hands and made something of their lives. You know, why? Being creative, being nonconformist, being exuberant, and it pays. And, you know, that's why I keep telling the students and the young architects, be nonconformist, create without fear, take part in international competitions, you know, give your life for something that expresses you properly without any kind of reticence. These people did it, you know, and today it's possible for anyone, doesn't matter where you are, in Paris, in London, in New York, or in Munzia Hussein. It's still possible to participate in international competitions, and it is possible to win. Yes, if you have something to say, if you believe in what you are doing, and if you work hard. They did. B&B Italia, 1970 to 1973, it's, well, anyway, it's high-tech building. We'll end actually this presentation on Sir Richard Rogers with his last building, his Swang's Song, which in my opinion is a beautiful swan song, very much in the spirit of, in a way, what you see here, but already that more sophisticated. A building which almost wants to fly, or it wants to fly without almost. You'll see it. A brilliant building of a man who was, I don't know, 87, 88, or 88 years old when he did it. But I will arrive at this. Color, yes, color, why not? The more the better. And as Romanians, we should be a little bit patriotic because it's the blue and the red and the yellow. Nice. So he worked here together with Renzo Piano. Now the well-known Pompidou Center, which they won the competition in 6
Dan,
years. Hello?
yeah, Dan, this is Vatsal. Uh,
Yes, hi.
Hello. Hi. I wanted to add a comment on the last slide, uh, the one with the yellow and red. Sometimes, yeah, I wondered, even here they have color codes for certain services, which is by the municipal corporation. So maybe here also some part of it might have played, the color coding might have played part in this color scheme. That's what I feel.
I don't know, maybe yes, maybe not, I don't know. But in Centre Georges Pompidou, they also use color, and there was no company here. Look, there is color, plenty of color, and you'll see some other parts too. Anyway, here the engineering was done by Peter Rice, truly a brilliant engineer who also worked for the pyramid, the Iron Base pyramid in Paris, and even for the opera in Sydney and for Lloyd's in London and so on. He died young, unfortunately. The museum for Constantine Brăcuș is here, and this was built by Renzo Piano. You know, we talked about Constantine Melnikov being born in poor circumstances. Well, think of Brâncuș being born in Hobița, a little village in Romania, and having arrived in the center of Paris with a building built for him by Renzo Piano right in front of Centre Georges Pompidou. You see, this is a clear proof that you can, if you have something to say it. Or as Stephen Hall said, if you have idealism in you, let it out. Not everybody will succeed, yes, but one thing is for sure: if you don't try, you fail for sure. If you try, you might fail, but you might also win. So what is best? I think is best is to try. I mean, I read that actually Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers, they were convinced they were not going to win. And that's why they had no inhibitions. They said, we are not going to win. We start from the premise that we are not going to win, but we will do the project exactly as we wanted to do it, without any kind of fear, because we know we are not going to win. And they won. You see, that's how it is. It's like in love. It's said that love follows you when you turn your back on it. It's the same thing, you know. Can you imagine? I mean, these were young people, maybe not even 30, or truly young people winning such a major project in the heart of Paris. Can you imagine the joy they had and the great change they had but they deserve this change because they won this competition. That's why I keep saying to the thousands of indifferent people I send messages every day, fight, participate in international competitions, be creative, be audacious. But indifference is a monster. It's hard to fight with it. Great sketch, full of verve. So the idea was to have a free space as large as possible and all the technical parts of the building to be moved at the outside, at the periphery of the plan, at the periphery of the building. And it worked. It's true they had benefited from having with them a great engineer. Now, after they built this, they split at one point, and Richard Rogers created the partnership, the Richard Rogers Partnership. Then later on, he created another company. They did this great building, the Lloyd's in London, 1978, 1984. Sorry, it's not 1084, but 1984. First high-tech building, and it's very impressive. It's a machinery, but I would say it is a machinery, but emotionally charged. He became increasingly good at doing this. So this is Lloyd's in London. It's in a way, it's a cathedral for shopping. Sorry for naming it in this way, but this is what it is. Again, the service is, placed outside of the building. Now, I understood there were losses of energy here, but what can you do? Even the greatest works have things that are questionable. I like, and I'm not a technocrat, far from it, but I like the viscerality of the pipes. This drama of the technical parts of the building. They are very sculptural. And they are essentially, technical entities. Reuters Data Center, London. This, yeah, this is the building. I mean, he built a lot, you know, just like Renzo Piano and just like Sir Norman Foster, his initial partner in Team 4. These people really had very, very rich and accomplished careers. And Sir Norman Foster, I almost said Sir Renzo Piano, are still alive and still building. European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg from 1994. Here we had the chance to have a talk last year with an engineer who contributed to this building, and he told us a few things about this. A great builder. I mean, you know, using this the language, architectural language, he created some landmarks that, you know, very coherent and rigorous, the design, and yet spectacular and plastically or artistically engaging.
Dan, what is the purpose of this building? What is the use? Why these cylinders?
It's a kind of a palace of justice for the European Union, a
Okay,
courtroom.
okay.
A building in Japan, 1987, 1993, a tower. We already know kind of what to expect from Sir Richard Rogers. He built also in Berlin. I hope I have here some images of what he built in Berlin. It's a fresh, honest, high-tech architecture, but it's not. Despite the fact that it is high-tech, I don't think it is pedantically so. I think there is it's almost naturally so, if I can use such a language. It's not an you know esoteric architecture. It's an architecture that is done by a man who I think is not you know speculating architecturally. He's building from conviction in a certain way using his language, and he does it well, I think. The Daimler Chrysler buildings in Berlin, his former partner Renzo Piano also built some buildings here. So this is close to Potsdamer Platz. Not bad. I mean, you know, it's a vigorous architecture. It's even if you don't have high-tech leanings or interests, you cannot deny the freshness of the vision and the vigor. And it's built impeccably, of course. It is in Germany. All the money was there, of course. I mean, this building, actually, the one you see here is by Renzo Piano. his former partner, but he built other buildings around this. Anyway, what is in the foreground is Sir Richard Rogers. Now, a building in London, 1990, 1994. As you can see, he uses color all the time. And good for him. He's not timid. He was not timid. Now, this sculpture is not by him. And anyway, the sculpture adds something to the drama of the entrance into the building. The Welsh Parliament, Cardiff, UK. I love that roof floating. You know, it's remarkable. So this is a governmental building, is the Parliament, but the architecture is not, petit bourgeois or restrictive or authoritarian. No, it's look inside. That wooden mushroom, huge in the center of the building. He was a courageous man, Sir Richard Rogers. Playful, that is. You can't be creative without being playful. It's a coherent project. It's well organized, well structured, and yet it has surprises. Look at this. And you'll see later on a beautiful building he did in France, also a judicial court or a palace of justice. Very, very nice. Quite a parliament building, isn't it? I imagine that even political people within such a building get inspired and maybe act accordingly, free spirited and generous and taking risks and so on, because architecture does have an impact on people. He deserved the Pritzker, I believe. Now you'll see two or three law courts. This one in Belgium, which is also very good, and sculptural and engaging and interesting. A lot can be done with a roof, and here again, it shows that when you deal with a roof in sculptural terms and in expressive terms, in dramatic terms, you get results. I mean, the aspiration for justice is a noble one. And I don't think a palace of justice or a law court should be, should have a flat roof above, restrictive and heavy. It's really about, in a way, almost the divine dimension of justice. Because when you do justice as a human being or try to do justice, you assume responsibilities which are complex, and if you don't have a certain idealism in you, you might fail. The preferred one for me is the one in France, and you are going to arrive there. But even this one has obvious qualities. It must be a joy to do architecture like this, which is creative, I mean, generous programs, and yes, some people do it, some people don't. Um, it was like this, and it will be like this. Look at the plan or the model. So yes, his architecture is high tech, but also the expressive power of some of his works would qualify him to be almost some kind of a modern day expressionist. This one I like very much, Le Palais de Justice de Bordeaux, from 1993 to 1999, the Palace of Justice in Bordeaux. And here he's able to bring in these rooms, archetypal, very interesting actually. And look at this. I mean, if this is not a very creative Palace of Justice, I don't know. I don't know what else to say. It is, of course, it's highly innovative and it's very, very interesting. The way he incorporates these rooms under the roof, and I think it's just remarkable. It's both science fiction in a way and archetypal. It's almost like a chapel, no? I mean, you looking at this picture, you could have said this is a chapel or a church. Well, it's not. It's a courtroom. And there are several, as you can see. I don't know exactly how many, 6, 7. It's a great building. Now the Madrid Barajas Airport, Terminal 4. A great airport. Let's hope the pandemic will go away and then the airports of the world will be used again. Although the activities of the planes is not the most sustainable one, but maybe some improvements will happen. He built a lot of cathedrals, but named differently. An airport, court law, or palace of justice. The Millennium Dome, also another great building in London, 1996, 1999. I love the structure. The structure becomes ornamental, becomes, aesthetically significant or charged. Now, the sculpture is not by him, of course, but now he changed again his firm. Here it is called Roger Sturck Harbour and Partners. And we look at the British Museum, World Conservation and Exhibition Centre in London, 2007, 2014. Even at the level of details, he is very coherent and elegant. He is more reticent in this building than in the previous ones, but the quality is high. One Hyde Park in London, apartment buildings. This here, luxurious, yes. But he also built for the poor, and we are going to see later on, social housing by Sir Richard Rogers, who I think was a compassionate man. But these buildings, as I said, are for the rich. Interesting apartments. You wouldn't easily expect this kind of rigid symmetry for him. The Y Cube in London. So we go from very expensive, luxurious apartments to social housing. And I like the fact that he didn't forget the poor. So these buildings also are innovative, they are colorful, and they are cheap. They are built for the underprivileged people. And I like the fact that he offered his service also for those who maybe couldn't even afford to think that Sir Richard Rogers could build for them. They're modest apartments, of course. I mean, if you compare the bedroom here with the bedroom in the previous building, you realize immediately it's a different. But these are for truly for these are social housing. They are very, very cheap. Maybe even offered for free. I don't know. So connected with what we just saw, the place Ladywell is the UK's first pop-up village with temporary homes, a cool cafe, a thriving indoor market, and workspace for entrepreneurs and charities. The resident takes a peek at this cool new community hangout, also for people in transit or young people and so on. So when Ladywell Leisure Center was demolished in 2014, Lewisham Council decided to put the site to good use instead of leaving a yawning gap in the high street, while new build and estate regeneration programs were being developed for the site. The council worked with architects Rogers, Stark, Harbour, and partners to create Place, a Lego bright temporary residential development offering a short-term solution to the housing crisis in the borough. And again, with simple means, with a lot of color and with a generous spirit, they created something I think that benefited the people who use these very affordable apartments. So there is dignity even in buildings that are built with very modest budgets. And there is dignity also in buildings built with high budgets, like we saw previously in those luxurious apartment buildings. It's the same architect. The same architect, and something of his spirit and something of his dignity is transferred to the buildings. So Good Hope is the second site for the cafe that runs to raise funds for the charity for Jimmy. The original site in Heather Green is currently undergoing a refit following a flood. And I have here a few pictures of the social aspects of this modest, enterprise. But being modest doesn't mean that he's not very, potent for the people who use it. The indoor market at place includes the Thunder and Lightning Fashion Boutique, run by Morgan Weber Newman. I don't know who this person is, but she's happy that she's able to have her own store in this, socially oriented environment. A florist run by Anne-Marie Lichmore, who sells both silk and real floral arrangements. And it moves me because these were people who would not have had the opportunity to do something like this. And because of an inspired project, a generous project, they are able to. And an Italian deli, we love pasta, run by Sicilian Corrado Scala, selling homemade tagliatelle, organic sauces, ice cream, and more. This is the joy of life. It doesn't matter, you are poor or rich. If you have a degree of freedom and you find understanding and you find the social structures to support you, life can flourish. And then, this is a place to of course, repair bicycles. There is also Bring and Fix, inviting people to share their skills, fix bikes and more. And here is, someone who maybe he worked for free, I don't know, but it's really about life, and it moves me. And I will end the presentation on Sir Richard Rogers today by showing his last work, which I think is brilliant. Here it is, a gallery that cantilevers 27 meters out above the hillside at the Chateau Lacoste vineyard in southern France. Literally, this thing is flying, is floating, is just supporting in 2 points here. Is unbelievable. This is a view from the entrance, and look at this. And he probably felt his life will end. So this is like I don't know. I'm imagining and I'm emotional now, but I see this is a swan song of Sir Richard Rogers. It's his salute, his hello, already in a way from beyond, from the other life. It's something almost religious here, if I'm not mistaken. It's an aspiration for above, for the beyond. Maybe I idealize what I see here, and I'm not a technocrat, but when I see this picture with this building built so rigorously, so precisely, and yet so exuberantly, I cannot think in a different way. Here you have the work of God, and here you have the work of man. And it is as if, they complement each other. It was said that God and man are correlative, and I believe it is true. And you see it well in this work, in this picture. This is how it is inside. It's a gallery. I don't know, I imagine to exhibit art. But I like it more outside. And I like the structure. It's beautiful, It's literally, there are only 4 points here, 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 and here, that this whole thing is supported on. And look at the brilliance of the detail. This metal structure, which is orange, or kind of an orange, and it's I think it's very nice. It wants to take off. It wants to become a plane. And his life was taking off, was at an end. But who knows, maybe death is not an end. Maybe it's a beginning. So as such, this building is a transition from the earth towards the sky, from the life now and here to the life there. And, it's a metaphor in a way. It takes off. Sir Richard Rogers took off through this building into the afterlife and the beyond. So let's wish him happy birthday for tomorrow. And thank you to the many people who are still with me today.